Harjit Singh's quiet life in Canada was built on a lie, one so deep that it took 33 years, a fingerprint match, and an international investigation to uncover the man he truly was, Baldev Singh, a fugitive wanted for murder in India since 1988. For more than 3 decades, Harjit Singh had lived a life that seemed perfectly ordinary in the quiet suburbs of Surrey, British Columbia. His neighbors knew him as the elderly man with kind eyes who always smiled when walking to the local market and never missed a Sunday at the Gurdwara. His small white house with its perfectly trimmed rose bushes looked like a picture of peace and stability. To everyone around him, Harjit was a symbol of the immigrant dream, someone who had come to Canada with nothing and built a life through hard work and honesty. He ran a modest trucking company, paid his taxes, and was respected in the local Sikh community for his generosity. Few people ever asked about his past, and he rarely spoke of it. When pressed, he would say he had come to Canada in the early 90s, leaving behind political unrest and difficult times in India. His calm demeanor and polite nature left no reason to doubt him. With time, he became a permanent resident, later a citizen, and blended into the rhythm of life in British Columbia. But beneath the routine of morning tea and late-night news lay a truth that Harjit never shared. There were old scars he covered with long sleeves, and nights when he woke from dreams he could never explain. Decades of silence had hidden the cracks in his story, but fate has a way of resurfacing buried truths. On a chilly autumn morning, a letter arrived in his mailbox, neatly stamped, official, and unexpected. The moment his eyes fell on the words Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, his hands trembled slightly. The peaceful life he had built for 33 years was about to crumble, and the ghosts of a past he thought forgotten were finally coming to find him. The letter sat unopened on Harjit's kitchen table for hours, its white envelope glaring under the dim yellow light. When he finally gathered the courage to tear it open, the words seemed to blur before his eyes. It was an official notice from the Canadian immigration authorities, informing him that his residency status was under review. The letter mentioned inconsistencies in his original application and requested that he appear for an interview regarding potential misrepresentation. For a moment, the old man felt his chest tighten, his heart pounding with the rhythm of a long-forgotten fear. He had lived through many things, but nothing prepared him for this. A threat to the only home he had known for over 3 decades. The news spread quietly among his neighbors. Some thought it must be a bureaucratic mistake, while others wondered why someone so settled would attract such scrutiny after all these years. Harjit avoided their eyes when they asked if everything was all right. He told them it was probably just a paperwork issue, but his trembling voice betrayed him. Inside, he knew it was more than that. He had spent years carefully building a new identity, and now it was slipping through his fingers. As the days passed, he grew more withdrawn. He stopped tending to his garden, and the roses that once bloomed in perfect rows began to wither. Letters from the authorities kept coming, each one colder and more urgent than the last. At night, he sat alone, reading and rereading the notice, searching for hope between the lines. But there was none. The letter had done what no storm or struggle ever could. It cracked the foundation of the life he had built, revealing a hidden past that no longer wanted to stay buried. In the late 1980s, a small farming village in Punjab was shaken by a crime that would haunt it for decades. The community was close-knit, where everyone knew each other's names and secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. One humid summer night in 1988, the peace of that quiet village shattered when a local moneylender was found dead inside his home. The man had been struck on the head, and the strongbox where he kept his savings was missing. Panic spread quickly, and rumors ran wild. Some whispered it was a robbery gone wrong. Others said it was revenge for debts unpaid. The police soon named 3 suspects, all young men from nearby villages. Among them was a man called Harjit Singh, a farmhand known for his quick temper and his habit of disappearing for days at a time. Within hours of the discovery, all 3 men vanished. Their families claimed they knew nothing, and the trail went cold. For months, the police searched the region, sending notices to nearby districts, but the men were gone without a trace. The case remained open, but as years passed, it faded into memory, another unsolved crime in a country full of them. Decades later, dusty files from that case were digitized and archived, barely noticed among thousands of others. Yet the name Harjit Singh would one day resurface thousands of miles away, in a different context entirely. When Canadian officials began investigating the elderly truck owner in Surrey, the old police records in Punjab suddenly seemed relevant again. Hidden in the tangled web of old testimonies and faded fingerprints was a clue linking two lives separated by continents and decades. The question that lingered was simple but chilling. Had the same Harjit Singh escaped justice and built a new life across the ocean? When Harjit Singh arrived in Canada in 1992, his story was the same as many others fleeing turmoil in India. He spoke of political persecution, of threats that forced him to leave his homeland with nothing but hope and a few documents proving who he was. His refugee claim was accepted after months of interviews and background checks, and soon he began rebuilding his life from scratch. The papers he carried appeared legitimate, the names and dates aligned, and no one questioned their authenticity. To the system, he was simply another refugee starting anew in a safer place. Years passed, and Harjit's file gathered dust in government archives. His application for permanent residency went through without issue, and eventually, he was granted citizenship. The past seemed buried forever. But in 2023, during a national project to digitize old immigration records, a retired officer named Raymond Cole noticed something unusual. While scanning Harjit's 1992 refugee application, he spotted a faint difference in the facial features of the man in the photo compared to later documents. Small details that most would overlook. The shape of the nose, the eyes, even the ear outline appeared slightly different. Curiosity led Cole to dig deeper. He compared Harjit's early signature with recent ones on tax and citizenship files. The handwriting was similar, yet not identical. It was a small inconsistency, but it sparked suspicion. He flagged the file for review, unaware that this single act would unravel a secret hidden for over 3 decades. What began as a routine clerical check now hinted at something darker, an identity that might not belong to the man everyone knew. In that quiet discovery, the first crack appeared in the carefully constructed life of Harjit Singh, and the truth was ready to surface. Investigators began retracing every step of Harjit Singh's early years in Canada, determined to uncover the truth. The deeper they dug, the more inconsistencies emerged. His first job record listed a different birth date than the one on his immigration papers. A hospital file from 1993 contained another variation. Even his early tax records showed mismatched identification numbers. None of it made sense. For a man who had lived such a quiet and stable life, there were far too many loose ends. His neighbors, once quick to defend him, began to recall small oddities they had long ignored. He had never displayed family photos in his home. When asked about his relatives in India, he would deflect with vague answers or change the subject entirely. Over the years, no one had ever seen him receive visitors from his homeland. The only person ever mentioned was a cousin who had come to Canada briefly in the early 2000s, only to die unexpectedly in 2003. After his death, Harjit quietly sold a small piece of inherited property and never spoke of it again. Investigators traced financial transactions linked to that sale and discovered money transfers sent to accounts under different names. One account led to a bank in New Delhi, registered to someone named Baldev Singh. The same name appeared in a decades-old Indian police database. The coincidence was too striking to ignore. What had started as a minor immigration review was beginning to look like a criminal investigation. Behind the facade of an elderly businessman lay a past carefully hidden under layers of forged paperwork and silence. Each discovery pushed investigators closer to a truth that Harjit had spent half his life trying to erase. As the investigation deepened, the Canadian authorities requested assistance from law enforcement in India. It was a standard procedure in cases involving potential identity fraud, but what they uncovered was far from ordinary. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police sent Harjit Singh's fingerprints and photographs to the Central Bureau of Investigation in New Delhi for verification. Weeks later, a response arrived that stunned everyone involved. The fingerprints matched those of a man named Baldev Singh, an Indian national wanted since 1988 for armed robbery and manslaughter. According to the old police files, Baldev Singh had been one of 3 men accused in the violent robbery of a moneylender in Punjab. The victim had died from his injuries, and the suspects had disappeared before they could be arrested. Interpol had even listed Boldev briefly in their database before the case went cold. The revelation sent shockwaves through the immigration department. For over 30 years, this man had lived in Canada under an assumed identity, building a life while evading justice for a crime that had never been resolved. Investigators pieced together how he might have done it. After fleeing India, Boldev had likely obtained the identification papers of another man, Harjit Singh, who had died under unrelated circumstances. Using those documents, he applied for refugee status in Canada, where identity verification methods were far less advanced at the time. Once accepted, he blended into society, carefully avoiding any connection to his past. When confronted with the findings, Harjit denied everything, insisting there must be a mistake. But the fingerprint evidence was irrefutable. What had once been seen as a simple paperwork anomaly was now a full-blown international criminal case. The man known as Harjit Singh was no longer who Canada believed him to be. At 73, Harjit Singh, or Boldev Singh, as investigators now claimed, refused to say much. He attended the mandatory hearings, sat quietly before the panel, and listened as the details of his life were laid out like pieces of a puzzle he could no longer control. The media caught wind of the case, and soon headlines spread across the country. Elderly man living in Canada for 33 years faces deportation over identity fraud. To many, he was a deceiver who had tricked the system. To others, he was an old man being punished for trying to survive. As journalists camped outside his modest home, the once respected neighbor became a mystery that everyone wanted to understand. Some of the people in his community defended him, remembering his generosity and quiet faith. Others felt betrayed, recalling how he had refused to speak about his past. The Gurdwara where he used to volunteer grew divided. Some prayed for him, while others turned their backs. Harjit, however, remained silent. He stopped answering calls and rarely stepped outside. His garden, once his pride, turned wild with neglect. Government lawyers prepared for deportation proceedings, arguing that the evidence against him was undeniable. Meanwhile, whispers began to circulate that the Indian authorities had political reasons for reviving the old case. Some locals believed the man was being used as a scapegoat for crimes committed by others decades ago. Yet, even those who doubted the accusations could not explain how the fingerprints matched. Behind the closed curtains of his quiet house, Harjit lived like a ghost, watching his world collapse piece by piece. Whether he was guilty or not, the truth no longer mattered to those who had already judged him. The man who once belonged everywhere now belonged nowhere. During one of his final interviews with immigration officers, Harjit Singh was asked to provide a written statement. The session was conducted in a small, windowless room inside a government building in Vancouver. He arrived dressed neatly, carrying a folder of old documents, his hands trembling slightly as he sat down. According to the official report, he agreed to give a full written account of his life before coming to Canada. What he wrote that day would become one of the most controversial parts of the case. In the statement, Harjit admitted that his real name was Boldev Singh, but insisted that he was innocent of the crime committed in Punjab. He claimed that local authorities had falsely accused him during a time of political unrest, when many young men were targeted without cause. He said he had fled not to escape justice, but to escape a system that had already condemned him without trial. The confession was never made public, and only a few officials knew its exact contents. Weeks later, when lawyers requested the document to present at the tribunal, it was missing. It had vanished from the official files without explanation. Some claimed it was a clerical error, others believed it had been deliberately removed. No one ever found out. Without the statement, Harjit's defense weakened, and the authorities moved forward with their case. The disappearance of that confession deepened the mystery surrounding him. If it truly contained the truth about his past, then someone, somewhere, had ensured it would never see the light of day. Whether that act protected him or silenced him remained a question no one could answer. The truth, once again, slipped quietly into the shadows. ChatGPT said, the immigration tribunal convened on a gray morning in downtown Vancouver. The small courtroom was filled with reporters, lawyers, and a handful of curious onlookers. At the center of it all sat Harjit Singh, frail and quiet, his face unreadable as the proceedings began. The government's case was clear and methodical. They presented fingerprint records, scanned documents, and testimony from both Canadian and Indian officials. Every piece of evidence painted the same picture: a man who had entered the country using another person's identity and evaded justice for more than 30 years. Harjit's lawyer, a young immigration attorney named Claire, argued passionately for compassion. She described her client as an elderly man with failing health, no family, and deep roots in Canada. She reminded the court that he had paid taxes, built a business, and contributed to the community. To deport him now, she said, would be an act of cruelty, not justice. She also questioned the reliability of evidence gathered from decades-old Indian records, suggesting that political interference might have influenced the case. The hearing stretched over several weeks. Outside the tribunal building, protesters gathered, some demanding that he be allowed to stay, others calling for his deportation. Inside, Harjit sat motionless, as if time itself had stopped for him. When the final ruling came, it was delivered in a voice that echoed through the silent room. Harjit Singh, also known as Baldev Singh, was to be deported to India within 90 days. As cameras flashed, Harjit's eyes remained lowered. There was no visible reaction, no anger or plea for mercy. It was as though he had expected this outcome all along. For him, the fight was over. For everyone else, the story was just beginning to darken. The morning of Harjit Singh's deportation was cold and silent. Immigration officers arrived at his small Surrey home just after sunrise, expecting to find an elderly man ready for transport. The house, however, was eerily quiet. The front door was unlocked, and the lights were still on. A cup of tea sat half-finished on the kitchen table beside a folded woolen shawl. His wallet, passport, and a few personal documents were neatly placed in a drawer. But Harjit Singh was gone. There was no sign of struggle, no forced entry, nothing disturbed, only absence. Authorities launched an immediate search, combing through nearby parks, hospitals, and bus stations. His neighbors were questioned, but none had seen him since the previous evening. A few claimed they heard a car engine late at night, while others thought they saw a shadow near the backyard fence. Within hours, news of his disappearance broke across the country. Some believed he had fled across the border into the United States. Others whispered that he had taken his own life rather than face deportation. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was no trace of him. Immigration officials suspended the deportation order, while conspiracy theories began to spread online. Some suggested he had been secretly taken away by Indian agents. Others believed sympathetic members of the community had helped him escape to live under yet another name. Months later, a hiker found an old turban caught on a branch deep in the forests of British Columbia, but no one could confirm if it belonged to him. Harjit Singh had vanished just as mysteriously as he had once appeared. Whether he was a fugitive escaping justice or an innocent man escaping fate, the truth disappeared with him, forever.